Hello everyone. Today, I will continue sharing with you the love story of two Sam and police officer Lee. I hope you enjoy the video. Night fell very quickly, so quickly that two Sam didn't even realize when the evening light outside the window had faded away. The small house sank into silence, a familiar kind of quiet, yet tonight it felt strangely heavy. There were no more Lee's footsteps, no more his low, steady voice coming from the kitchen or the living room. Only the ticking of the wall clock remained, counting each anxious beat in her heart. The soft yellow glow of the night lamp spilled across the old wall, casting blurred patches of light and shadow. Two Sam sat on the edge of the bed, her baby lying snugly in her arms. The little body felt warmer than usual. The baby's breathing was uneven, quick and shallow, each exhale accompanied by a faint wheezing sound. She bent down and placed her hand on the child's forehead. Hot. So hot that it felt as if her palm were burning. Two Sam's heart tightened. A chill ran down her spine, even though there was no breeze in the room. So hot. She whispered, her voice thin and trembling, as if speaking any louder might make things worse. Since Lee had left on a distant assignment, the house had been home to just the two of them. During the day, two Sam tried to stay calm. She grew used to cooking by herself, rocking the baby to sleep, handling all the small, nameless tasks on her own. But at night, when everything fell silent, loneliness had nowhere left to hide. There was no one to ask. No one to lean on when her thoughts spiraled. No one to say, "I'm here." There was only her, and a tiny life completely dependent on her. The baby let out a soft moan, then began to cry. The cry was weak but persistent, as if the child didn't have the strength to cry any louder. Two Sam quickly pulled the baby close to her chest, her other hand gently rubbing the child's back out of habit. "Shoo, it's okay, my baby," she murmured, her voice hoarse. She wiped the sweat from the baby's forehead, then from her own. Her back was soaked through with sweat. Two Sam laid the baby down, prepared some milk, and tried to feed a few small sips. The baby managed only a couple of sucks before crying again, head tilting to one side, face scrunched with exhaustion. She carried the baby back and forth around the room. Every step was so light it barely touched the floor. She was afraid of startling the child, afraid that any sound might shatter the fragile balance holding the two of them together. But the fever wouldn't go down. Instead, the child's body grew hotter. The breathing became more rapid. Two Sam glanced at the clock. It was past midnight. A fear, clear and unmistakably real, flooded her mind. It was no longer vague, no longer something she could avoid. This wasn't the fear of a weak woman, but the most primal fear of a mother facing the possibility of losing her child. What if something happens? The thought flashed through her mind, making her hands shake violently. No, no. She shook her head, as if trying to chase the thought away. Mommy's here. Mommy won't let anything happen to you. She pressed her forehead to her baby's. The heat stung her eyes with tears. In that moment, two Sam wished Lee were here. Just having him stand there, without saying a word, would make her feel less alone. But the room remained silent. Two Sam took a deep breath. There was no time to hesitate anymore. She stood up, her hands trembling as she hurriedly put on a jacket, wrapped the baby in a thin blanket, careful as if even the slightest roughness might hurt the child. When she opened the door, cold night air rushed in. Two Sam tightened her arms around her baby and stepped outside. Her shadow stretched long across the ground, quiet and solitary. In that moment, she knew, no matter how afraid she was, she could not afford to collapse. For her child. The hospital at night was brightly lit in a cold, unfeeling way. White fluorescent lights stretched across the ceiling, reflecting off the glossy tile floors and making everything feel distant and lifeless. The sharp scent of disinfectant lingered in the air, not overpowering, but strong enough to jolt one into painful clarity, as if all fragile hope were being stripped away. Sam held her baby tightly against her chest, walking quickly but not daring to run. She feared that any sudden jolt would make it harder for the baby to breathe. The child's face was flushed, lips dry, eyes half closed, lashes trembling with each rapid breath. Every breath the baby took made Sam's heart clench. "Please." Her voice broke as she reached the night shift nurse. "My baby has had a high fever since this evening, she's having trouble breathing. I don't know what to do." She spoke quickly, afraid that even a second's hesitation would keep the urgency from being understood. Her hands shook so badly that she had to clutch the baby's clothes just to keep herself from collapsing. The nurse swiftly took the baby from her arms. The moment her embrace was empty, a freezing hollowness spread through Sam's body. She stood there, frozen, her arms falling limply to her sides, fingers curling unconsciously. Just a few short seconds. But to her, it felt like a lifetime. The emergency room door closed before her eyes. The dry click of the latch echoed, severing the fragile thread holding her together. She stood there, staring at the white door, her mind so empty she could barely hear the sounds around her. Then she slowly sank down onto a plastic chair against the wall. Her back pressed into the icy surface, the cold seeping through her thin clothes into her skin. She no longer had the strength to stand. Her legs trembled, heavy as lead. The hallway stretched endlessly. From time to time, there were hurried footsteps of doctors, the squeak of a gurney rolling over tiles, hushed whispers from other families. But it all felt far away. Sam stared at only one thing, the door to the room where her child lay. Time crawled at a terrifying pace. Every minute felt like an hour. Every second stole her breath. She sat motionless, hands clasped tightly together. Her palms were slick with sweat. Her thoughts spiraled out of control, the worst possibilities rising again and again no matter how hard she tried to push them away. What if I came too late? What if my baby is weaker than I think? What if? She couldn't bear to finish the thought. The faintest sound of a door opening was enough to make Sam jump to her feet. Her heart raced, her throat tightening, only to sink again in disappointment when it was just a nurse passing by. She sat back down. This time, her shoulders began to shake, not from the cold, but from exhaustion. For the first time in her life, Sam truly understood what it meant to carry the whole world alone. There was no one to share her fear with. No one to hold her hand when she was on the verge of breaking. No one to say, "It's okay, I'm here." She took out her phone. The screen lit up the dim, cold space. Lee's name appeared at the top of her contacts, so familiar it made her heart ache. Her finger hovered over the screen for a long time. She hesitated. She knew he was far away. She knew he was on duty. She knew that even if she called, he couldn't immediately be there for them. But fear outweighed everything else. In the end, she pressed call. The ringing echoed through the quiet hospital night. With every ring, Sam held her breath. When the call was answered, she opened her mouth, but for a moment, she couldn't speak. There was only the sound of her trembling breath. Lee. His name slipped out, and her tears spilled over uncontrollably. In that hospital hallway at midnight, beneath the cold white lights and the familiar scent of disinfectant, Sam understood that no matter how strong she tried to be, she was still just a mother terrified for her child. The phone rang late at night, cutting through the rare quiet after a long shift. The sound wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to make Lee jerk his head around. He had just managed to take off half of his uniform, the sweat on his back hadn't even dried yet. The simple break room lay under pale white light, heavy with fatigue and silence. When the screen lit up, Sam's name appeared. Lee's heart tightened. Not from surprise, but from instinct. A very familiar, very clear instinct, as if someone had suddenly clenched his chest. Sam rarely called at this hour. And whenever she did, it was never about something small. He answered immediately. Sam? Just saying her name, his voice dropped instinctively. On the other end, there was no immediate reply, only the sound of rapid, shallow breathing, as if someone were struggling to hold back tears. Then her voice came through, thin, broken, trembling. The baby has a high fever. I'm at the hospital. Lee froze. The entire room seemed to solidify around him. All other sounds, the footsteps, the voices of his teammates outside the hallway, vanished. In that instant, Lee's world narrowed to a single fragile thread connecting him to the trembling voice on the other end of the line. How did it happen so suddenly? He asked quickly, his tone more urgent than he realized. How is the baby now? Which hospital are you at? His hand clenched the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. In his mind, the worst images kept flashing, a tiny child, burning with fever, weak breaths, Sam holding the baby alone in a cold hospital corridor. The doctors are checking. Sam hesitated. I'm okay. Lee closed his eyes. He knew. He knew she was lying. It was Sam's clumsy kind of lie, always putting herself last, always trying to appear strong so others wouldn't worry. And that was exactly what made Lee's chest ache to the point of suffocation. As a police officer, Lee was used to danger. He had faced life and death situations, rushed into places others wanted to avoid. He was used to controlling his emotions, used to keeping a clear head in the most intense moments. But never had he felt as helpless as he did now. He wasn't there. He couldn't run back to his child. He couldn't hold Sam's hand and say, "Let me handle this." Lee opened his eyes. The pale white ceiling stared back at him, cold and indifferent. He leaned against the wall and slowly sank onto the chair by the table. His entire body felt unbearably heavy, as if he had just come through an endless battle. I'm sorry. His voice turned hoarse, lower than usual. I can't come back right away. The moment he said those words, Lee felt something shatter inside his chest. He had apologized many times in his life, to teammates, to civilians, to his superiors. But never had an apology felt this heavy. But I'm here. He continued, slowly, each word drawn from deep within. I'm listening to you. Don't be afraid. On the other end of the line, Sam didn't answer right away. There was only steadier breathing, as if she were clinging to his voice to keep herself from collapsing. Lee tightened his grip on the phone, pressing it close to his ear. He closed his eyes and imagined the familiar scene, Sam curled up on a hospital chair, hands tightly clasped, the baby behind the white door, cold light casting shadows across her exhausted face. He hated the distance more than ever. At opposite ends of the country, two people stayed awake through the same long night. One in a hospital, holding the greatest fear of her life. The other far away, burdened with responsibilities that wouldn't allow him to leave. Lee quietly looked up at the wall clock. The minute hand crept forward, slow and merciless. He knew this night would be very long. And he also knew that even if he couldn't be by her side, he wouldn't hang up, not until Sam said that their child was better. Because right now, that was all he could do. And he would do it to the very end. Morning began to break very slowly. Not the kind of dawn filled with brilliant sunlight, but a pale, diluted glow seeping through the tall hospital windows. That fragile light mirrored Sam's state, still standing, yet one gentle gust away from collapse. She had sat in that corridor all night. No sleep. No food. Not daring to take her eyes off the emergency room door for even a second. Her body ached, calves numb from standing up and sitting down too many times. Her throat was parched, her mind heavy as if wrapped in fog. Yet all of that paled beside the fear still hanging in the air, a fear without an answer. When the white door finally opened, Sam almost didn't register it at first. Until she saw the doctor step out. In that instant, her heart seemed to stop. Her entire body went rigid. Her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles turned white, her nails digging into her skin without her noticing. She sprang to her feet and moved forward on instinct. "Doctor, my child." Her voice broke on the very first word. The doctor looked at her, fatigue in his eyes but no haste in his manner. He spoke slowly, clearly, as if he understood that the woman before him was at the very edge of endurance. "The baby has a respiratory infection. The high fever made it difficult for her to breathe, but fortunately, you brought her in time." At those words, Sam's head began to buzz. "She's more stable now. She needs further monitoring, but her life is not in danger." She barely heard anything after that. The sound seemed to drift away, fading into emptiness. She felt only one thing with piercing clarity, her legs giving way, her heart dropping before being pulled back up by a fragile thread. Tears spilled over. Not sobs. Not loud crying. Just tears flowing freely, hot, unstoppable, impossible to hide. They were tears of relief after terror. Tears of exhaustion after a night of holding herself together. Tears of someone who had stepped back from the edge without ever realizing how close she had been. When she was finally allowed into the room, Sam walked very slowly. The ward was quieter than she had expected. The light was softer, no longer as cold as the hallway. Her baby lay there, so small amid the tubes and machines, her face pale but peaceful. Her breathing was steady, so light that one might think she was in a deep sleep. Sam sat down beside the bed. In that moment, all the strength drained out of her. Her shoulders slumped. Her back curved. She placed her hand over her child's, tiny, soft, warmer than it had been at midnight. She bowed her head low. "My baby." Her voice was rough. "I'm sorry. Sorry for not noticing sooner that you were unwell. Sorry for letting you suffer. Sorry for being so afraid that I almost couldn't breathe." She sat there for a long time, doing nothing, just sitting and watching her child. Watching each breath, each small rise and fall of that tiny chest. Every breath was more precious to her than anything in the world. Her phone vibrated softly. Sam startled, then quickly picked it up, afraid the sound might wake the baby. A message from Lee. "I can't be there, but I'm proud of you. You're stronger than I ever imagined." She read the message over and over. Tears fell again, but this time, the corners of her lips curved ever so slightly. A tired, tearful, but genuine smile. She understood that even though Lee couldn't be there, his love was still present, in the uninterrupted calls, in the midnight messages, in the guilt she could feel between his words. More importantly, Sam suddenly realized something she had never dared to think before. That she had done it. That even when she was alone, she had stood firm. That fear hadn't defeated her, because behind it was her love for her child. Outside, the sky had grown a little brighter. A long night had passed. No drama. No miracles. Just a mother, a child, and a quiet strength growing in the aftermath of fear. That night, Sam didn't just save her child. She learned how to stand on her own. Not to replace anyone, but to protect the most important thing in her life.
Xin chào mọi người, cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video hôm nay của mình. Chúc mọi người có một ngày mới vui vẻ, hạnh phúc và một ngày làm việc tràn đầy năng lượng. Hy vọng rằng mọi người sẽ yêu thích những câu chuyện mình chia sẻ và ủng hộ kênh của mình để mình có động lực ra nhiều video hơn. Nếu mà mọi người yêu thích câu chuyện về người mẹ đơn thân Diệu Hân và Tử Sam thì nhớ bấm nút theo dõi và bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất nha. Cảm ơn mọi người đã lắng nghe những chia sẻ của mình và đã ủng hộ kênh của mình trong suốt thời gian vừa qua. Hy vọng rằng vẫn sẽ được đồng hành cùng mọi người trong thời gian sắp tới và đồng hành cùng mọi người trong những câu chuyện mới mà mình chuẩn bị đăng tải. Hiện tại thì kênh của mình đang phát hành những video vào khung giờ 7 giờ tối và 7 giờ sáng. Nếu mà mọi người yêu thích thì nhớ chú ý đón xem và hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở trong video tiếp theo nhé.